So Apple's done what I said they would do in response, we think, to the government's pressure with this technical capability notice. So Apple has withdrawn the advanced data protection tool. Thus, this government is making your personal security, your data protection security weaker, along with lots of other things that I have my criticisms and complaints about, but now they are making your personal data less secure. Now, I object to this because it affects everybody in the UK, because Apple is withdrawing that feature for the very few that are obviously up to no good, and the government quite rightly really want to see what they're doing and find out what they're doing, but at the same time that shouldn't come at the cost of everybody else's security. That is where the fair balance comes in, and that is what I'd like to talk about in this video. Lots of people obviously have emailed me about this, asked me questions by email, by X, everything else. Obviously this cannot be legal advice, but I can give you my views. Is it open to challenge is one of the questions, and in short, yes, and I think Apple will challenge it. In my previous video, which I will show you the clip here, I have to mute myself to play you the video, but in my clip here, I said I think they will just pull the feature entirely. Here's what I said. People. So I can see a huge problem with this. I can see Apple refusing to comply, tying them up in legal knots, or just withdrawing the service altogether. And so I think they're going to do a combination of those. I think they're refusing to comply in the sense that they are refusing to provide a backdoor access to their encrypted access technology, which I don't really think they would be able to do anyway, because by the nature of it, if you don't understand what this is, I mean, I don't profess to fully understand it, but I understand it enough to be able to explain it to you. End-to-end encryption is there's you and your device here, your device being key, and your data is stored over here, that is on your iCloud or whatever. And there is an encryption key which only your device has to decrypt the data that is stored over here. Encryption just means jumbled up. So think of it like a password, but instead of just a password to access the data, the password sends it through some mathematical algorithm, jumbles it all up, and it can only be undone with that key. And that key is only stored on your device. That is your end to the other end encryption. Anyone in between, or even at the other end, if they have, let's say, Apple has your data on the iCloud, if it has this feature turned on, even though they have access to the data, they cannot read it. They cannot see the photographs. They cannot read the text. They cannot read your emails or whatever it is that you've got stored there. Only with your device you can decrypt it and read it. And that's it. And that's the feature that they're turning off. Now, there are other security features, the standard, password access, etc., which with the password and maybe a two-factor authentication, which is a PIN to your mobile, which is nothing like end-to-end encryption. In fact, point of fact, I don't know how many people have this advanced data protection, which is end-to-end encryption, turned on. It's said in the report that I read that it's not known how many people have this turned on. Why would we know? Unless Apple tells us, which they won't, because that's the nature of it, that the whole thing is meant to be private. So we don't know how many people actually use it. I think a lot of people probably use it, but particularly those that are more tech savvy probably use it. And as I say, the vast majority of us that are law abiding are not the problem here. It is the very few that obviously they want access to. There are a few alternatives, and there's a few ways to avoid this, and ultimately there are legal challenges to it, which I'll come to in this video. That's right, the sun is reflecting off something outside and it constantly catches my eye. So what are we going to do here? Now, as I said in that clip, Apple will refuse to comply, first of all, which they have ostensibly. They've refused to provide backdoor access to the government, assuming that the government has provided this technical capability notice, which I'll talk about in a minute, because they refuse to confirm or deny that that's the case, but we can infer that it is because Apple's doing what it's doing. So they've refused to provide this backdoor access. I also said tie them up in legal knots and disable the service. So disable the service, yes, we can see from the BBC article, if we go to grab there, I mean, I've checked this for myself on a phone that does not have this turned on. It says this here: Apple can no longer offer advanced data protection in the UK to new users. Now, it's understood that it says here that existing users' access will be disabled at a later date. I'm not sure when and how and why, etc., but I would think that they will have this legal battle first. So probably what they've done is they've taken the middle road and said, right, well, we'll disable it for now for new users, But existing users, well, we're going to continue to protect those until we've had this legal debate. I think this is pure guesswork because none of this is confirmed for matters of national security and all the rest of it. So I think that they will, in that final option, is tie them up in legal knots. And I think there will be legal challenge to this, and I'll tell you why in this video. I'll also give you some alternative to go to, and just as a caveat to all of this, I know that I have sponsors to my channel now and again. This is not a sponsored video, but I'm going to mention a couple of services in here with 1 or 2 discounts, etc. But it's not a sponsored video. I have to stress that. Legally, I have to stress that, you understand. So what can we do about this? Well, first the alternatives, and then I'll come back to the legal challenges. Well, one of the alternatives, as it happens, not a sponsored video, but is with someone that does sponsor my videos occasionally, which is NordVPN, and it comes along with NordLocker, which is end-to-end encryption. NordLocker, depending on the plan, gives you storage with end-to-end encryption for your files, and my understanding at the moment is nothing has changed here. So this end-to-end encryption means that you store your files on the server, and only your device can unlock that. Not even Nord or anyone else in the middle can read that data. And it says here, people don't usually have a lot to hide, but they do have something to protect. It's a matter of privacy. If big tech got their way, people's emails, photos, personal data would all be categorized in databases and and create profit from it. Even if you trust the companies and their algorithms, you must understand that mistakes happen. Now, just as a point of fact there, for example, let's say you use, Google Photo, and you want your photographs listed by date order or size or things like that. Obviously, they need to be able to read the data to be able to sort them and search them. And if you want the ease and the convenience of being able to say, I want to see pictures of planes that I've taken photographs of, you can search for it and it will bring them up. Obviously, they have to have access to the data to be able to do that. And so that obviously then Google has access to the data because they are able to do that search. Now, and I'm sure there's lots more technicalities in the back end that I'm not explaining here very well, but you get the gist. So there it says, many of these companies will use all of that information for profit if they possibly can. The benefits of end-to-end encryption. There are many advantages. It protects your data, even if by accident or otherwise the company allows hackers to get into the network. They would get nothing because the data is protected with end-to-end encryption. It's a scrambled, garbled mess, and no one has any access rights. They can't read it, they can't access it. It's all private, etc. So that is one alternative. As I say, it's not a sponsored video, but there is a discount always. You'll find the link in the description below. If you want an alternative to iCloud for the time being until this is sorted out, there's your one alternative. And just as another alternative, many of you might have heard of Google Workspace for businesses and so on. They also have, they call it client-side encryption, but then they go on to describe it as end-to-end encryption. Now, there's a very subtle difference. Now, I'll probably not explain this very well, especially for those of you that are very senior technicians. Give me a break or just give me a clarification in the comments. But my understanding here, client-side encryption is a type of end-to-end encryption, but it's not true end-to-end encryption if, let's say, an administrator, like a company administrator, one of your organizations, your team or whatever, have the encryption key, and therefore they can decrypt it, but not other third parties and not Google. So it's a type of end-to-end encryption, but your organization has the control, and your organization might have an admin person that is able to decrypt the data. I hope I got that right, and I hope that makes sense. But ordinarily, Google cannot do that. So that is an alternative. Google Workspace does that as well. The only other alternative is stop using it. Stop using iCloud altogether and go for a physical encrypted hard drive, and you're not storing your data off on any third-party cloud somewhere. That involves buying some equipment, relying on that equipment, and then we always have this rule of threes. So you've got 3 separate backups, three types of backup in 3 separate places on 3 different types of equipment, if you really want to ensure that they are backed up and secure. So I'll flash one on screen for an example, and I'll link one below. The example I'm thinking of here, this particular one, you can choose many, but this is one that I know to be very reliable. Not sponsored. Again, I have to stress, Samsung portable SSD, 2 terabytes worth of storage, which has hardware encryption built in. So your private data is obviously then going to be encrypted with this password using hardware encryption on this device. And I know that to be reliable. I've seen it reviewed many, many times. If you want a secure physical storage, 2 terabytes. I know many iCloud plans, for example. To give you a comparison, if you're not clear already, the standard iCloud Plus storage is 2 terabytes. That's for $8.99 a month. You go up to, I think only recently this was introduced, you can go up to 6 terabytes for $26.99 a month. That's obviously for those of you that are content creators like me, perhaps, or 12 terabytes a month, which is $54.99 a month. And again, I think you'll know who you are if you're on those plans. And if you're on those plans, you probably know about the security features anyway. But to give you an idea, that Samsung device there, yes, you do have to shell out the money for it. It's £178. But you get the 2 terabytes, you pay it once, you've got it for as long as it lasts. And these things tend to last a long time these days. I think it's relatively rare that these devices fail these days. And obviously you can double up the space for not quite double the money. So that's another alternative. Again, I'll link that below. Not sponsored, but I'll link that below. But now to the law, and how have they managed to do this in the first place? So let's have a look at this, and let's look at what kind of challenges they might face. Starting with the Investigatory Powers Act of 2016, under Section 253, it provides for technical capability notices. This is what we understand, or what we infer and guess, that Apple's been served with to make them comply, to be able to let them access via some kind of backdoor this encrypted data stored on iCloud. A technical capability notice. The Secretary of State may give a relevant operator, that just means one of the companies, a technical capability notice, that just means a bit of paper to say we want to be able to do this, or rather you have to make it possible for us to do this if, and this is where the legal challenge might come in. Secretary of State considers the notice is necessary for securing that the operator or another relevant operator has the capability to provide any assistance with such operation may be required to provide in relation to any relevant authorization. So in English, that means that the government can think that it's necessary to make the company, give them access to, or have the capability to access or assist with access to any of that stored data. That's all that bit means. Then, because this is A plus B plus C requirement, B, Secretary of State considers that the conduct required by the notice is proportionate to what is sought to be achieved by that conduct. This is the bit that I think they're really going to fall down on, potentially. I think there'll be a huge legal challenge here. I have no doubt that Apple will challenge this, and I suspect that this is long underway already. Probably countless hours of lawyers have gone into this already. Probably even preemptively, they've probably guessed already that this might be a long time coming, so they might well have decided that they'll put lawyer hours into this already. This argument here, that the Secretary of State considers that the conduct required by the notice, so making Apple give them a backdoor access to this data, is proportionate to what is sought to be achieved. So essentially, the government will have to say, we want access to this data, and here's why. And it is proportionate that Apple give us a backdoor access to all of the encrypted data, potentially at least. Now, there is a caveat, which I'll come back to in a minute, because this is not just like access it whenever they wish. There is a caveat. But notwithstanding the caveat, the notice says, if we say so, we want to be able to access this encrypted data. Is that proportionate? I think there's a huge question mark over that. I think there is a serious issue with that, because the right to privacy is protected. It's a fundamental right to privacy, and it is a fundamental breach of independent autonomy to store your information, your photographs, your emails, your data, your private stuff, your finances, anything you can possibly think of that you might have stored on these devices. Somebody likened it to inviting a bunch of police into your house, let them search every drawer, every device, everything else. And would you be happy with that? Now, again, there are two camps of people here. some people that say, yeah, that's fine, I've got nothing to hide. And the other camp that says, no, hang on a minute, there's a point of principle here. It doesn't matter, I've not done anything wrong. I don't think you should have access to this because, why should you have access to this unless you can prove that there's genuinely going to be something there and that you are likely to be some kind of criminal and that they should find something. So both are valid viewpoints, I suppose. And I suppose on the one hand, you can have this view that, well, it doesn't matter, I've got nothing to hide, come and have a look. Which, to be perfectly honest, I would probably lean towards that myself, because on the one hand, I've got nothing to hide, I'm not doing anything wrong, but that's not to say that there's stuff there that I'd rather they didn't see, because it's like private stuff, not that it's anything wrong. And also, I'm a lawyer, I've got client files on there, there's a lot of privileged information stored on those servers. And as a bit of a tangent on that one point, they would have to go through some kind of process as well for people like me, for lawyers. They would have to go through that process of separating that which is legally privileged, because there'll be restrictions on looking at and using legally privileged material that is the data of other people, and I'm under a duty to keep that data secure, and so on and so forth. And so this applies to not just to lawyers, but this will apply to people in education, particularly let's say, for example, educational psychologists or any other kind of psychologists or any other kind of therapists, medical staff, doctors, nurses, etc. They all have this data stored. Now, a huge amount of that is obviously going to be on the standard systems, but many organizations might let those individual users use their own storage for various things, and so they might be, particularly if they are independent, they might be using their own systems to store their stuff. So that throws up all sorts of questions here. So is it proportionate that they can say to Apple, we want to be able to break this encryption if necessary? And then the final bit is the decision to give the notice has been approved by the Judicial Commissioner. So all that aside, and then just to round this off, under subsection 2, a technical capability notice is a notice that imposes the relevant operator any applicable obligations specified in the notice, requiring them to take steps, etc. So in other words, it's to force them to comply with whatever technical capability they want. Now, as I said, the proportionality aspect here is a big question mark for me. But there we come to the caveat. Now, the caveat may assist the government in this proportionality, but at the same time, I don't think it completely overrides it. The caveat is this, which I think has been wrongly interpreted and possibly wrongly reported in some cases. People have understood this to be, right, well, now that Apple's turned this off, the government has got carte blanche access to all data. That is not quite true. They still have to go through the same process. They still have to make the same determination that it's necessary. They still have to prove why they have to look at it. They still have to have a warrant. So broadly speaking, they still have to satisfy this test. And I've talked about this in a previous video. So first of all, there's got to be a legal basis for it. There has to be a legal reason why they want to look at the data. Secondly, there's got to be a proper goal. So a legitimate goal. They have to show what they are looking for, why they're looking for it, on top of the legal basis for it. And thirdly, it's got to be, again, that word proportionate. It's got to be a proportionate exercise to look at that data. So even with this encryption feature turned off, they still have to go through that process and they still have to have authorization to look at it. So they'll still be targeting an individual and they'll have to say, well, here's the legal basis, here's the legal goal, and here's the proportionality test. And so those are met, therefore we want to look at that data. The problem here, and the reason this is all stirred up in the first place, is that even let's say they've got a target and they know that there's an individual that they highly suspect is operating nefariously, involved in some kind of criminality. They want to target that person. They go through all these steps. They satisfy those 3 legal tests. They get the authorization to look at that person's data, and then they hit the brick wall because they can't see it because the data is encrypted. And without that individual's key, password, whatever, to decrypt the data, they can't look at the data. Now that you might then think, well, that's fair enough, because if that one individual is going through all that trouble and they are literally being questioned and they want access to this data and that person is being so difficult, you might think, here's the balancing act here, you might think, well, that's fair enough because they should have access to that data. If that person is under so much scrutiny already, then they should have access to the data. On the other hand, you might say, well, they have the right to privacy, so why should they have access to the data just because they say so? And that's the balancing act. Now, again, I stress, for the vast, vast majority of us, we are not doing anything wrong, and therefore it's a double-edged sword. Why should Apple turn off the security for everybody just because a few people are not cooperating? But then at the same time, if we're not doing anything wrong, why would we be so difficult about it? But what I would say is this: if you ended up, let's say you have done nothing wrong, and you do end up in this position for whatever reason, you're mistaken with somebody else, or there's a whole load of confusion, and you end up the target of this investigation, then they want to look at all of your stuff. And let's say that you think, well, actually, there's something there that you'd rather they didn't see, really private or whatever. Not to say that it's criminal or anything, but let's say it's really private and you rather they didn't look at it. Because as soon as they have access to it, there's the potential, at least, statistically, there's the potential of this going wrong and the wrong people having access to it, etc. So then you might be under a very difficult position. You'll be then under that microscope, and it might not feel very comfortable for very long, even if you've done nothing wrong, because most people will tell you it's just like driving a car. If you see blue lights in the rear mirror, many people will panic and think, what have I done wrong? Even if you've done nothing wrong. You'll check the speedo, you'll check your lane positioning, well, most of us do anyway, to make sure that you're compliant with all the laws because you've seen blue lights in your rear view mirror. That's just how the human brain works. We do react to these things. So there's the balancing act, there's the double-edged sword. I can see that this is probably already underway to being challenged, because I think there are big question marks over that proportionality exercise. I can understand why they want it, because for those few people, it is for those few people that have probably got a lot of information that then is going to put people at risk if they can't access that information. But then we come to the double-edged sword of that, which is, if this encryption is preventing them from looking at data, which is then going to help them to protect people, the encryption of that data itself is protecting everybody else. So let's say parents routinely take photographs of their children and store them on iCloud. Clearly, they want that to be secure and safe, and ideally end-to-end encrypted, so no third party can get access to it without authorization, hacking, and so on. And even if they did hack in, they can't see it because it's encrypted. But with that turned off, then every single family and their children and all of their data, all of their personal data, their personal documents, their photographs, etc., are at a higher level of risk because they've been forced to turn this encryption off. That is a problem for me. And I think that's something that MPs should really think about as well, because their own personal, their personal family life security is more likely to be at risk. And being public figures, they are more likely to be at risk than many other people. And so they might value their privacy and security, etc. And so they might want to think about their own family security and really ask questions about who it is in government that's made this request. But a lot of this we don't know because it's not reported. Obviously, it's matters of national security. I can understand the reasons for it. I can only hope that there is a really serious reason that they absolutely must have access to this so that it's for our greater good. I can only hope that that is the case, but obviously we don't know because none of that is reported. But I hope you found that some useful insight and thought. And again, and as always, leave me your thoughts and comments in the box below, please. Let me know if you're thinking about an alternative now, whether you're going to store your stuff on some kind of permanent hardware encrypted device instead of cloud technology. Let me know what your thoughts are, because I think there's a lot of people in different viewpoints here. Some people just won't care because it's like, again, nothing to hide, so it really doesn't matter. Go on as normal. And other people probably think that this is a step too far. Let me know what you think. Leave me your thoughts below. Please do like the video and subscribe as always. And as always, thank you for watching.